1. This happened around June last year. I had been working at this grocery shop for over a year as a cashier and become kind of friends with a few of the people I worked with. I was often put on the night shift, finishing at 11 p.m. if I remember correctly. So it was usually me, another cashier, and about 5 night fill people who restock shelves and whatnot. On this night, one of the night fill people working was P, a charismatic early 20s student who was super nice to everyone in the store, and sometimes hung around the counter talking to me and the other cashier for a bit when it wasn't busy. Nothing strange about him. I actually liked it when he was working, because time passed quicker when I had someone to talk to. Little did I know. At around 9 p.m. I went on my break. The office and break room was downstairs and the staff bathroom was next to it. While I was having a snack, P came in and we had a short conversation. I think we were just talking about what we did outside of work and whatever. He laughed, and after finishing what I was eating, I went to the bathroom. The staff bathroom was just a single room, no stalls with lockers at the back, where we put our things. A toilet next to them, and a sink. As soon as I walked in, I noticed an open locker at the very bottom, next to the toilet with a bunch of someone's things in it. I remember very clearly noticing it because I saw a pack of cigarettes and I really wanted to take one because I was a smoker who didn't buy her own cigarettes at the time. I sat on the toilet to do my thing, while still looking at the locker. I noticed there was an iPhone face down, propped at an angle with a jumper, and instantly Kill Bill sirens started going off in my head. I ignored it for a bit, and just closed the locker door. I finished doing my thing, and just started pacing around the bathroom. I knew this was dodgy because firstly, why would anyone put their things in the bottom locker next to the toilet, which is probably the filthiest place to put them? Secondly, even though most people didn't have locks on their lockers, who would leave the locker wide open with their phone in plain sight? I kept thinking for a few minutes, trying to figure out if I should pick up the phone and check if I wasn't being recorded. At the time I was thinking, but if I'm not, that would be so disrespectful. But I also didn't want to find out that I was in fact being recorded in the toilet. Finally, I snapped out of it, realized I had literally nothing to lose if I just grabbed the phone and checked. And sure enough, there it was. The moment I grabbed the phone and looked at the screen, the video stopped recording. In front of me was the home screen with all the usual iPhone apps, and amongst them one called Hidden Camera, or something along those lines. A photo of P as the background. I absolutely lost my shit. I opened the app, and on it there were so many videos. I scrolled through it to find the most recent one and started watching it. The video starts with P putting his phone down and propping it up on his jumper to make sure the back camera is facing the toilet. At this point, I'm pretty sure I was crying and shaking from how fucked the whole thing was. I then fast forward to the last few minutes, it was about 10 to 15 minutes long, and see myself going into the bathroom, pulling my pants down and sitting down, all the while looking at the locker and then closing the locker door. This whole time I was trying to convince myself that this wasn't actually happening, but that was all the proof I needed. I sat down on the toilet and kept crying, not knowing what to do. I then started messaging my friend group chat, obviously distressed and trying to explain as quickly as I could. I wasn't sure if this was something that required me calling the cops, but I think one of my friends finally told me to call them, so I did. I tried to explain what happened quietly. I was really scared that P had figured out something was wrong in the toilet, and was going to try to get in. And also scared that the cops wouldn't help since I wasn't really in physical danger, even though this was definitely very illegal. I just felt violated, but like it was somehow my fault, like I was in the wrong for having checked the phone in the first place. I was told to wait in the bathroom until the police came. I waited for about 40 minutes, just crying and shaking and messaging my friends. Then I heard a knock at the door, and they told me it was the police. I let them in, and they closed the door. Behind them was P, looking like a scared dog. I told them what happened. They looked at the phone, gathered all the evidence, arrested P, and took me to the police station to take my statement. I knew he had been released on bail until his court case, and he wasn't allowed near me or my workplace. but I was terrified that I would run into him and he'd try to hurt me. Thankfully, this never happened. The police kept in contact with me and let me know that they had found hundreds of upskirting photos and staff bathroom videos. P was charged with several offenses and sentenced to 10 months in jail, and was later deported since he was here on a student visa. So anyways, today I'm happy to say, gross creep, we probably won't meet. 2. I have always been uncomfortable with the story I am about to tell to you all. Partly because it was so odd and out of the ordinary, but nevertheless, in the spirit of October, and the fact that I'm starting to go camping again, I thought it would be interesting to share my own scary camping experience. This happened during the summer of 2012 when I was 15, and still an active member of the local Boy Scouts troop. I went camping, something my troop had frequently done. The camp we chose was for a full weekend. It was a nice forested area with taller grass. It also lacked other campers, and we saw no cars driving in or out throughout the time we spent there. Since we did not have to worry about other campers, our troop had a big campfire on Saturday night that went late into the night. Eventually our campfire started to die out, prompting us to put it out and head to our respective tents and hit the hay. Oddly for me, I was unable to sleep that night. I usually slept well on campouts, especially when I have the pleasure of using a tent alone, like I had done on this occasion. So I sat there in complete silence listening to the various sounds around my tent. Eventually I found myself dozing off, until I heard something walking nearby our campsite. There was a very apparent rustling of grass that began to get closer and closer to the blob tents that our boys were sleeping in. After a solid minute of movement, the sound stopped right in front of a tent that was about 7 or so feet from mine. I then heard the rustling start up again and head off in the direction of the forest. I was paralyzed with fear. What could have made that sound? I thought about it for a solid few minutes, and eventually decided it must have been an adult checking on us. Before I went to sleep, I looked out the little tent mesh window at the side of my tent, and did not see anything out of the ordinary in our campsite. This sound went on for a bit in the distance, but I did not record for how long, as I eventually fell asleep. I woke up later that night to the same sound of rustling, yet this time, it was close to our tent circle as it was the first time I heard it. While I did not think too much of this, I silently listened to the sound to see where it was headed. It once again went to the same area it did the first time. Being curious, I peered through the tent window to see what was making the noise. My face turned white and I could not move. My mind was still trying to register what was going on. I saw a large black figure standing before the tent in the darkness, and it was clear it was not a scout, as the figure had no flashlight on and was far too large to be any boy in our troop. Suddenly, the figure inched their hand to the tent door and began to slowly unzip it. After what felt like several minutes, the figure seemed to poke their head into the tent. Immediately after, a deafening screech came from the tent. I heard other tents being unzipped, and saw lights being flashed at the one tent, as well as a black figure starting to run away from the tent. Within seconds, the figure was running out of view into the tree lines. A few adults at the camp came to see the commotion. The boys who were in the tent told what they had experienced, and several boys mentioned that they had heard the sound of rustling in the grass around our tents throughout the night. Unfortunately, none of the boys were able to get a clear view of the person, except that the figure looked like a man, and he wore dark clothing. Disturbed, the adults had us moved to the campsite where they were staying at, and 2 adults volunteered to stay awake the rest of the night in case of the creep's return. The next morning, we quickly packed up our stuff and left as fast as possible. We warned the ranger in charge, who called the local sheriff. From what I know, the person was never caught, and our troop never camped there again. It was easily one of my most frightening experiences, and something I would always remember when I went camping during my time as a Boy Scout. The creepy man stalking my Boy Scout troop. Let's not meet. 3. A little background information on me. I have PD, panic disorder. For those who don't know what it is, it's a mental illness that causes extreme anxiety, severe panic attacks, and a slough of problems. I have been suffering from this for over a year now, and while it is getting better, it is still very difficult to deal with. Keep this in mind. My husband and I have been married a little over a year now. The time we were married, unfortunately, I was undergoing medical issues that no doctors could seem to explain. I was having panic attacks all the time, and they would be so severe I would have to be taken to the ER, where they would have to literally sedate me to calm me down. I was also losing weight at an exponential and scary rate, becoming sicker and sicker as time went on. Not even a month after we married, I lost my job and was homebound while my husband worked second shift, which was 4 p.m. to 3 a.m. He would arrive home around 4 a.m., leaving me alone most of the time. My parents and younger brother lived close by, perhaps a 10-minute drive at most. But at the moment, my mother, who is a school teacher, and father, who works in a factory, were unable to watch over me. They called as frequently as they could, but that was all they could do. In May, I was told by doctors that I was literally at death's door, and unless something happened quick, my family was going to lose me. I was given medications to help with the panic attacks, to get me to eat, etc. They wanted to hospitalize me, but I refused. My parents decided that when they and my brother went to Florida the next month, they were taking me with them. Again, keep in mind, I am both anxious and extremely sick. Around this time, my real issues began, not with me, but with our neighbors. See, we've never actually met our neighbors personally. My husband lived in the trailer for a month on his own before we married, and he always said they were odd, but they didn't seem to be of any concern. However, once I came into the picture, that changed. The person who lived in the trailer before us was actually a cousin of mine, who rented from another cousin and his wife who lived states away. Nora was a huge druggie and a drug dealer, so people got used to getting their fixes and drugs at the trailer we now live in. Then, a few months before we moved in, she got in trouble with the law and landed in jail for some time. I guess our neighbors, who according to our landlords were drug addicts and raging alcoholics as well, thought that perhaps she was back. I'm not quite sure. I suppose this is because from where I was sick, and my husband slept when he could from both working odd hours and taking care of me, so they never actually saw us. They just knew someone was there. They became active at night. During the day, they were predominantly quiet. Every once in a while, they would do something outside, but for the most part, nothing really happened. It was always after my husband left for work. My car was still there, which should have told them at least someone was still home. It started off innocently enough, driving up and down in front of the house, parking in the road directly in front of it and waiting. They'd honk the horn, but I ignored them. Several times I called my parents, asking them what to do. They said for the time to just ignore them, because maybe they thought Nora was back, and after some time, they'd get the hint it was new people and leave me alone. So I did just that, for a time. When they started driving up the driveway and stopping at the porch, that's when I first called the cops. All I was told was that as long as they didn't encroach on my actual property, there was nothing they could do. They advised me to turn on the lights to my house, signaling I was home. I couldn't sleep, despite needing to. I had mono and panic disorder and depression, and I desperately needed sleep. My husband had the weekends off, and, you can guess it, no issues during the weekends. It was insane and infuriating. Everyone believed me when I said I was having problems, but there was only so much they could do. My father-in-law brought over one of his shotguns, a 12-gauge, knowing that I was a good shot. He told me to use it if need be. Another background thing is I shot trap for years, and when I was 18, I placed second in districts. I chose not to go to state, but knowing I was good enough for second was a proud moment for me. My father-in-law made me promise I would use it if it came to it, so I did. One night my husband was at work, and I guess my body finally shut off. I fell asleep for once, only to be woken up around 1 a.m. by the sound of our neighbor's truck tearing out from behind the trailer. I jumped up, looked outside to see them driving out of our driveway. They started speeding up and down the front of the house. I called the cops again. I called my dad and mom, and my dad came over because I was in a full panic attack. My dad called my husband, who came over immediately. There were tire tracks in the grass behind the trailer, but they couldn't necessarily prove it was them, despite me describing the truck down to the depths. My dad told the cops this had been going on long enough, but again, not enough evidence or proof. A week, just one more week until I could go with my family to Florida. I somehow managed to be a bridesmaid in my older brother's wedding, despite being so sick. I was doped up on medications to keep me calm so I wouldn't have a panic attack, and to be honest, I don't recall much about that day other than it poured rain. My husband, naturally, was at work. I was sitting at home. Our 2 cats were asleep rather soundly. I was playing my 3DS, Story of Seasons, relaxing, with Markiplier on the TV for background noise. The time around midnight, when my cats suddenly woke up and came unglued. They ran to the side door, then to the front door, growling and hissing, their hair on end. They had never behaved that way. So I started to get up to see what it was they were freaking out about, when I heard it. "How we gonna do this?" I froze. I heard them. I heard their footsteps as they walked up and down the front porch. I wasn't sure how many there were, but I know for a fact there were at least 3 men outside. My curtains were closed, and most of the lights were off, but the TV was on, and surely they could hear Markiplier's eccentric volume. "And maybe. I'm not." They had gotten quieter. I heard their footsteps on the porch again. I grabbed my phone, shakily swiping until I found my dad's number, and called him. I remember breathing hard, feeling a panic attack setting in. "Hello?" They're here. I remember sobbing. "On the porch, Daddy. They want to get in." "I'm on my way. Call the cops." I hung up with him, then heard them talking amongst themselves on how they wanted to break in, what they wanted, etc. I ran into the bedroom, grabbed the 12 gauge, opened the chamber to see it fully loaded, and called the cops. I left the lights off. I decided I was going to have them caught this time. I wasn't going to run them off. The dispatch answered, and I told him what was going on. As sick as I was, I managed to hold that shotgun to my shoulder, pointed at the door, remembering everything my dad taught me while I was a hunter, and when I shot trap. But I was still scared out of my mind. Somehow I kept my panic attack down, but I was still breathing hard. "Calm your breathing, hon. You said they're outside?" "Yes." I heard one say they heard me. Then the other said that it won't be a problem. My God. "They're coming, sweetie, I promise. I'm armed." "Excuse me?" "I'm armed." I yelled, hoping that they'd hear. "With what, sweetheart?" 12 gauge. They want to hurt me. I'm not going to let them." "She's armed." I heard him tell the police, who I suppose were on their way. I heard "armed" from one of the guys outside. Then silence. "Ma'am?" "I can't." I heard their footsteps leaving, then saw the lights to my dad's truck. "My dad's here." I lowered the shotgun and ran outside. My dad and younger brother running out of the truck. My dad had the Judge in his hand, which is a pistol that shoots 12 gauge rounds. Feels like a freaking hand cannon. You'd swear you'd just broken your wrist. While my younger brother was holding a knife. "It's my dad and brother. They're armed too." "Okay, what of the men?" "I don't see them." "When the cops get there, disarm yourselves, okay?" I thanked the dispatcher for everything. And about this time, the cops pulled up. I told my dad and younger brother to disarm, so they put their weapons in the truck, while I took my gun inside and sat it in the kitchen on top of our dinner table. My dad told me to get back inside the house, and for my younger brother to go with me. As soon as I stepped inside, the panic attack hit. My dad came inside for a moment and hugged me, telling me how brave I had been, especially for holding it as long as I did, shaking, crying. gasping for breath. I listened as he went back outside. The cops found footprints and an area on the porch where the men had tried to break in at one point. But the men had scattered, leaving it difficult for the cops to trace exactly where they came from. My dad told them it was the neighbors, and my landlords actually called and told the cops it was more than likely our neighbors as well, who had apparently been giving my cousin who lives up the road a hard time as well. The cops noticed some of the footprints went into the neighbor's yard, but they weren't home, of course. I remember my dad and younger brother standing outside just as the cops pulled up, yelling as loudly as they could that they would drop them if they ever so much as saw them around me again. "Enough is enough," my dad yelled over and over. "She's sick. She needs rest. Leave her the hell alone. I'll drop your ass, I swear to God." And I noticed he was crying. My dad isn't the type of person to do that. My whole life I have seen my dad cry maybe a handful of times. When he talked about his deceased father. When my mom's mom died. When the doctors told me I was at death's door. When my younger brother was born. 10 years difference between me and him. 12 between him and his older brother. My dad had been scared that he wouldn't get there in time, and maybe, just maybe, I would hesitate to protect myself. But I had made my mind up. I wasn't going to let them get away with it anymore. That night my husband came home from work and hugged me so tightly. I thought my lungs would burst. My younger brother texted him what was going on, but reassured him I was okay. A week later I went to Florida. Time went on, and I am still getting better. As for my neighbors, I've never had problems with them again. I'm not sure if it was the cops actually going to their house, or if it was my dad and younger brother threatening them. Or maybe it was me, them hearing me say that I was armed. I don't know. I don't care. They're still there, but I know they won't do anything ever again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 339. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Okay, so this goes up on Wednesday, so that'll be day number 4 of the 10 days of Halloween. So we should have another something up for you in a little while. Not sure what it's going to be yet. I haven't decided yet, but there will be something. Let's see. Sunday was Lovecraft. Monday will be Poe. It's probably going to be something by Poe again today then. I'm alternating between the two. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.